December 7th, 1941. 7:55 a.m. The sky over Pearl Harbor was cloudless, the water mirror still. Sailors were drinking coffee, mechanics were wiping grease off their hands, officers were reading yesterday's newspapers. And then the horizon screamed. Hundreds of Japanese aircraft tore through the Hawaiian sky like steel locusts. Within minutes, battleships were burning. Men were drowning in oil-slicked water. The Arizona exploded so violently that the shockwave could be felt miles away. But here's what they never told you. Pearl Harbor wasn't a surprise. Not to everyone. There were spies walking freely through Honolulu counting ships, photographing hangars, sending encrypted telegrams to Tokyo. There was a radar station that saw the attack coming 40 minutes before the first bomb dropped and was ignored. There was a 14-part encrypted message intercepted by Washington hours before the strike decoded, read, and filed away. And then there were the carriers. The most valuable ships in the entire Pacific Fleet gone. Not sunk, just gone. So let me ask you a question. Was Pearl Harbor really a surprise? Or was it something else entirely? Stick with me, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about that day. Let's rewind. September 1941. 3 months before the attack, a man named Takeo Yoshikawa steps off a steamer in Honolulu. He's wearing a linen suit, carrying a tourist guidebook, smiling like he's on vacation. But Yoshikawa isn't a tourist. He's a Japanese naval intelligence officer, and his mission is to map every inch of Pearl Harbor without ever setting foot on the base. Yoshikawa rents a small apartment overlooking the harbor. He buys a pair of binoculars. He visits a tea house on a hill where he can see Battleship Row through the window. He takes boat tours. He plays golf at courses near Hickam Field. He even hires a private plane for a sightseeing flight over the naval base. And every night, he writes reports, ship positions, aircraft counts, patrol schedules, guard rotations. On September 24th, Tokyo sends him a message. It's called the Bomb Plot Message, and it divides Pearl Harbor into 5 geographic zones. Tokyo wants to know exactly which ships are in which zone, updated daily. American codebreakers intercept this message. They translate it within 15 days. But here's the kicker. They don't send it to Hawaii. They don't tell Admiral Kimmel. They don't alert anyone at Pearl Harbor. Washington labels it non-critical and files it away. Yoshikawa keeps working. By late November, he's sending updates twice a day. He knows the carriers are out. He knows the battleships are clustered together like sitting ducks. He knows there's no torpedo netting in the harbor. And then there's Otto Quinn. Quinn is a Nazi sleeper agent who moved to Hawaii in 1936 under contract to Japanese intelligence. He's supposed to take over once war breaks out and the consulate shuts down. In October, Yoshikawa meets him in secret and hands him $14,000 in cash and a coded instruction letter. But Quinn is sloppy. American counterintelligence already has him on a suspect list. After the attack, he's arrested within hours. Yoshikawa? He walks free. He boards a repatriation ship in 1942 and returns to Japan a hero. So, here's the question. If Washington intercepted the bomb plot message in September, why didn't they warn Hawaii? Were they incompetent? Or was someone waiting for something to happen? Let's talk about the radar. December 7th, 1941, 7:02 a.m. Opana Radar Station, northern tip of Oahu. 2 soldiers, Private Joseph Lockard and Private George Elliott, are supposed to shut down their equipment at 7 a.m. and head to breakfast. But their ride is late, so they keep the radar running. At 7:02, a massive blip appears on the screen. It's 137 miles north of Oahu, and it's big. Bigger than anything they've ever seen. Elliot is excited. Lockard is skeptical, but they report it anyway. They call the Temporary Information Center at Fort Shafter. Private Joseph McDonald picks up the phone. He finds the duty officer, Lieutenant Kermit Tyler, a pilot on his second day of training as an aircraft observer. Tyler listens to the report. He thinks for a moment. Then he says, because Tyler remembers something a friend told him. Whenever the local radio station plays Hawaiian music all night, it means a flight of B-17 bombers is arriving from the mainland, using the broadcast signal for navigation. So Tyler assumes the radar contact is the B-17 seconds. He's wrong. Lockhart and Elliott keep tracking the contact until 7:40 a.m., when it disappears into ground clutter. They shut down the radar and head to breakfast. They don't learn about the attack until they arrive at the mess hall and see the smoke rising over Pearl Harbor. Here's the thing. If Tyler had taken that report seriously, Pearl Harbor could have had 38 minutes of warning. Pilots could have scrambled. Anti-aircraft guns could have been manned. Ships could have dispersed. But it didn't happen. Was Tyler just inexperienced? Or was there something deeper, something that made the entire chain of command blind to the threat? Now we get to the big one, the conspiracy that won't die. Late night, December 6th, 1941, Washington, D.C. American codebreakers intercept a 14-part encrypted message being sent from Tokyo to the Japanese embassy in Washington. They decode it before the Japanese ambassador even receives it. The message is long. It's diplomatic. It accuses the United States of obstructing Japan's efforts to create a new order in East Asia. And the final line, part 14, says this: the Japanese government has come to the conclusion that an agreement cannot be reached through further negotiations. That's it. No declaration of war, no mention of Pearl Harbor, just a suspension of talks. But here's where it gets interesting. President Franklin D. Roosevelt reads the intercept around 10 p.m. on December 6th, 9 hours before the attack. According to the only surviving witness, a naval officer who was in the Oval Study that night, Roosevelt turns to his advisor Harry Hopkins and says something to the effect of, "This means war." The exact words are lost to history, but the implication is clear. Roosevelt knew something was coming. So why didn't he warn Pearl Harbor? Conspiracy theorists say Roosevelt wanted the attack, that he needed a reason to enter World War II, and Pearl Harbor was the perfect excuse. They point to the fact that American codebreakers had been reading Japanese diplomatic traffic for months. They point to warnings from British intelligence. They point to the missing carriers. Skeptics say that's nonsense. They argue that the 14-part message didn't mention Pearl Harbor, that Washington expected an attack on the Philippines, not Hawaii, that the real problem was bad timing, bureaucratic incompetence, and a massive intelligence failure. But here's what we know for sure. Roosevelt read that message 9 hours before the attack, and Pearl Harbor was never warned. So what do you think? Was it incompetence? Or something darker? Let's talk about the weapon that changed everything. Pearl Harbor is shallow, only 40 feet deep in most places. That's a problem, because when a 2-ton aerial torpedo slams into the water at 200 miles per hour, it plunges deep, sometimes 150 feet, before leveling out and running toward the target. In Pearl Harbor, that torpedo would just bury itself in the mud. So the Japanese had to innovate. Enter the Type 91 Modification 2 torpedo, nicknamed the Thunderfish. Japanese engineers spent months perfecting this weapon. They added wooden stabilizing fins near the nose to prevent the torpedo from rolling when it hit the water. They adjusted the horizontal rudders so the nose would pitch up immediately on impact, reducing the initial plunge to just a few feet. By mid-October 1941, the weapon was ready. But production was slow. The strike force didn't receive enough torpedoes until November 18th, less than 3 weeks before the attack. And here's the eerie part. Yoshikawa, the spy in Honolulu, had been reporting for weeks about the depth of Pearl Harbor. His intelligence fed directly into the torpedo development program. So when those Japanese planes roared over the harbor on December 7th, they weren't guessing. They knew exactly what they were doing. The Thunderfish worked perfectly. Torpedoes ripped through the hulls of the Oklahoma, the West Virginia, the California. Battleships capsized within minutes. It was devastation, and it was engineered. Here's the part that keeps conspiracy theorists awake at night. On December 7th, 1941, the three most valuable ships in the Pacific Fleet, the aircraft carriers USS Enterprise, USS Lexington, and USS Saratoga, were nowhere near Pearl Harbor. The Enterprise had just delivered planes to Wake Island and was returning to Pearl Harbor, but was still a few miles out when the attack began. The Lexington was at sea, ferrying aircraft to Midway Island. The Saratoga was on the west coast, undergoing maintenance. None of them were hit. All three survived and went on to become the backbone of America's Pacific counteroffensive. So, coincidence or conspiracy? Some historians say it's pure luck, that the carriers were on routine missions and just happened to be out of port that day. Others say it's suspicious. That Roosevelt knew the attack was coming and quietly moved the carriers to safety while leaving the expendable battleships as bait. And then there's Admiral Husband Kimmel, the commander of the Pacific Fleet. After the attack, he was blamed for being unprepared. He was demoted. His career was destroyed. He spent the rest of his life trying to clear his name, claiming he was never given the intelligence he needed to defend Pearl Harbor. Was Kimmel a scapegoat, or was he genuinely at fault? We may never know. But the fact remains, the carriers weren't there. And that changed the course of the war. Let's end where it began. Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, 8:06 a.m. A Japanese bomb pierces the deck of the USS Arizona and detonates in the forward magazine. The explosion is catastrophic. The ship breaks in two. Fire erupts. Steel melts. Men are vaporized instantly. 1,177 officers and crewmen die in a matter of seconds. The Arizona sinks to the bottom of the harbor, and she's still there today. A tomb. A memorial. A scar on the ocean floor, and every day for the past 80 years, oil has been leaking from her hull, about 7 to 9 quarts a day. It rises to the surface in slow, dark ribbons, spreading across the water like ink. They call it the Black Tears of the Arizona. When the ship sank, she was carrying 1.5 million gallons of fuel. Most of it burned off in the explosion, but an estimated 500,000 gallons remain trapped in the wreckage. And the Navy won't remove it, because the Arizona is a war grave. Over 900 sailors are still entombed inside her hull. To disturb the oil would be to disturb their resting place. So the tears keep falling. Every single day. A reminder, a warning, a wound that never heals. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Was Pearl Harbor a surprise, or was it a secret? Did Washington miss the warning signs, or did they see them and let it happen? I've given you the facts, the spies, the radar, the intercepted message, the missing carriers, the black tears. Now it's your turn. What do you think? Drop your answer in the comments, because this conversation isn't over. And if you want more untold World War II secret stories they don't teach in history class, hit that subscribe button, because we're just getting started. See you in the next one.